Thank you so much for joining us for another Patreon-backed interview episode of the Dukes of Dice, which we are now calling Holding Court, and coming into the court, a Duke of her own right, the Honorable Suzanne Sheldon. All rise. Suzanne, how are you doing?
I am doing quite well. Thank you so much. I am honored to be here amongst the fine court of the Dukes of Dice, of which I am technically kind of one, so it feels very circular.
I asked the guild. The guild said it was cool. It's cool. Be cool.
You've got the best and smartest guild around, so if the guild says it's cool, then aces. I'm excited.
Both the guild and the Gould signed off on this one, so
yeah. You're not gonna let that one slide? Come on, man.
When have I ever let anything slide, Suze? Anything?
Fair point.
Pimento 3.
After a number of years, I should know. Oh.
Yep.
And it's begun.
And interview over. No, just kidding. And folks notice she's not just a Duke now. She's also a judge. Duke and judge. Anyway, we are way off track, way too early in this, because I'm sure there's at least one person, maybe, who doesn't know who you are. I don't know. It seems like it would be a weird overlap, but let's properly introduce you, Suzanne Sheldon. Suzanne Sheldon, who are you in this fine board gaming world?
Well, hello, Alex. My name is, as you've said multiple times now, Suzanne Sheldon. And I am, I guess I am a content creator or a pundit, which I've been called by Christmas show to flip the table a lot. He likes to use the word pundit. And I do video content for the Dice Tower on their YouTube channel. I cover crowdfunding games, and I have a segment on crowdfunding every week. And I have a semi-defunct, but I'm actually bringing it back to life, board game app segment there as well. And just very, very, very recently, I have become a co-host of the Dice Tower podcast, which is a long-running podcast. And Mandy Hutchinson of To Die For Games and I are partners, and she and I co-host every other episode of the Dice Tower, and we alternate episodes with Tom Vassell and Eric Summerer. And that is quite the adventure. It is, podcasting that way is new to us, and it's been entertaining and fun and rewarding and challenging and stressful. And then some people might know me from Twitter, where I tweet far too much. And
you left off Restoration Games, which has not gotten plugged enough by anyone recently, so we got to give those guys some love.
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah, I do. I have the amazing title, second only to a Duke of Dice, of Master of Fireworks with Restoration Games. And what that really means is that I help them a few hours a week organize some of their marketing materials and do some of their event planning and things like that. It's amazing, and happy to answer any questions about that. I'd like to be really transparent about it because I know that it can be, so thank you for the reminder.
You're welcome.
I mean, for all my transparency there, I totally boofed it and forgot it. But because it is a little, I think some people are like, is it a conflict? You create content, but then you work for a games company. And so the way I try to best combat that is be really open and upfront about that.
And I've just started wearing that same hat pretty recently, and I'm still navigating how exactly that works. So if you figure it out, you let me know, and we'll be buddies together, shill buddies together.
We'll definitely have to share notes, and it's true. We're kind of although your role is much more significant and full time and things like that, and I think that integrity and honesty and openness, I think that solves 98% of the challenges out there for us.
I would agree with that. And folks, if you thought that long list of gaming industry titles was enough for Suzanne, add on top of that, she also works full time, also is a mom, and also probably has more roles in gaming that weren't even listed just then. So keep that in mind. In fact, one Gen Can't comes to mind. Anyway, we'll get to a lot of these. I don't know how we're going to keep this at any sort of a reasonable length, because as folks know, Suze and the Dukes are super tight. So Suze, I'm going to start off this fantastic interview by going way back. The Suzanne Sheldon origin story. Was it a radioactive gaming spider, or what was it that got you the gaming bug, so to speak?
I think what it was a radioactive Shivan dragon.
Okay.
Because back in 1994, I went over to meet up with a girlfriend in high school, and I was waiting for her to get her stuff. Was we were gonna go out and hang out or whatever, and her little brother had these weird looking cards out, and I was like, "What's that?" And he said, "Oh, it's this game. You want to look?" And I said, "Sure." And he showed me this game, and it had beautiful art, and it was like nothing I'd really seen before, and I was instantly interested. And I asked him where he got it, and he told me, and I went to the local game store where he got it and asked, and was instantly embraced by the community there, and they were happy to teach me Magic the Gathering. And so that was way back in 1994. Alex, were you alive in 1994?
I was a wizened 5-year-old at that point.
Oh, my good gravy. All righty, interview over.
Sorry. So, okay, so was there any sort of gaming affinity before that? Was it just kind of family board games, maybe a Monopoly here or there, or were there hints of this even before that?
Yeah, actually, I've always had a fondness for card games. Both my maternal grandparents are from the Midwest, and anybody in the Midwest knows that euchre is a thing there. And so between my mom's family playing euchre and then my dad's family, my grandparents were big bridge aficionados and card game players there as well. So I actually remember, spending a lot of time with my grandparents playing, bridge very poorly, but had a lot of fun with that. And so kind of classic card games were definitely probably an earlier entree. And, the typical sorry, Parcheesi, whatever, when you're a kid, half-hearted games of Trivial Pursuit where all you really cared about was playing with the pie pieces instead of answering these really random questions that no 8-year-old would ever know the answer to.
I'm surprised Trivial Pursuit isn't your favorite game of all time, if only for the pie.
Yeah, fair point. But after a couple of attempts at consuming those pies, I did realize they were not intended to be edible, and kind of veered away after that.
Yeah, that's fair. So how do the gaming tastes evolve? So we go from 94, Magic the Gathering. Are there other games that come into the mix pretty early, or is it pretty consistently Magic for a while there?
Well, what happened is that I would spend literally all weekend from open to close in the back of this local game store that was kind of your stereotyped old school store. It was dark. It was dusty. It had some really crappy beat up old buffet tables in the back to game on. And I would be there open to close playing Magic. But as in between games and, as you're waiting for matches to end or whatever, they had hobby board games. And so that's also where, I learned games like Quarto and Robo Rally and Catan, all in that time period. And really those are, that kind of grouping of gaming experiences back then is really what pulled me in. And I didn't ever truly look back. The 90s had a ton of CCGs try to copy the Magic formula, and boy, I spent every penny I earned of my meager salary on those stupid games, and I have a basement full of boxes to prove it.
What's your biggest CCG regret?
My biggest CCG is selling my Magic. You played in 94, went to college, needed a little bit of money, and sold a lot of really impressive cards for relatively not any money compared to what they would get today. So,
oh man.
But I think a lot of old school Magic players have that story, so I'm not alone in that.
So you're on the CCG side and sort of that collectible nature, gotta have them all. When does the shift happen from more of the CCG side into more of the hobby board gaming side?
It really happened after I graduated from college, and was, entering the workforce and had friends that we wanted to get together, but we had all kind of pulled away from Magic. It was just too expensive and too competitive to keep up with, but we still liked playing games. And so, we were playing games like, now I'm totally blanking, but we were playing other games that were out around then. And actually what I remember playing a lot of was Munchkin, of all things. And we played a lot of, games that way. And, I was, Tikal was one of my early games. I'm trying to think of other ones that I've had. I mean, I've had a lot of games for a long time. So, Catan, Tigris and Euphrates, things like that. It just, kept on going. And I think my gaming habits would ebb and flow as, life got busy or not, or, other activities came and went. But gaming's always been an undercurrent of my life. And, I don't know, a few years ago. I just was getting back into it again, like really, really hardcore. And it's just something that I found a community around. I think the internet has really helped with that and changed the face of board gaming and analog gaming in general. And it feels great. And I love it. And, it's one of those things, I go to conventions or you talk to, muggles or even some people like within the hobby, they're pretty heavy into the hobby and they need breaks. They get tired of it, right? I'm like, nope. Other than sleeping and eating, I don't get tired of gaming. So there's that.
Well, and I think it's proven out in terms of just, again, how many hats you've been able to put on in the industry. It seems like from the time we first met you early on in doing the podcast and first reached out and said, hey, do you want to come on the show, to now, I got to imagine there's at least 4 or 5 more roles that you've added in that time. So to go back a bit, how did the Dice Tower connection first happen?
Yeah, well, when I was getting back into board gaming, and looking for content around board games, I think, looking on YouTube or whatever, you find the Dice Tower because, it continues to be, I think, the largest board gaming content network. And they were producing a lot of, reviews for games I was interested in. And I did hit the point where I realized, I don't see any women except for Tom's daughter, and I don't see any people of color really. I mean, Z was getting into it, and he has a Cuban background, but and I wrote to Tom, and hey, in a very nice way, I said it would be cool if you spoke about this and encouraged women to get out there and create content and make themselves more visible. And Tom wrote back in a really nice way and was like, yeah, I care, but I really can only do so much because I'm a guy and I can't make people, do content and things like that. And he basically, in a nice way, said back to me, like, if you want to do something, do something. If you want to increase the visibility of women or people of color, you should do it. I'm like, oh, okay. And this is pretty early on in Board Game Breakfast, when Board Game Breakfast had started. And I thought about it, and I thought about content that I thought would add value to the community that I wasn't seeing covered a lot, which was board game app coverage. And I gave it a shot. And honestly, I do have to say, I wonder today, in today's quality of Dice Tower content, if the segment I gave Tom like 3-4 years ago, if he would reject that out of hand today if I submitted it. It was awful. But God bless him. He gave me a chance. And, flash forward years later, here I am.
What was that first ever segment? Do you remember?
It was an app segment. I think it was for, I think it was for Elder Sign Omens, but maybe not. It was for some app.
Does that video exist somewhere?
I don't know. Let's just assume it doesn't.
Okay. Well, now I know what I'm going to be doing after this interview.
Oh, gee, that's so sad.
Oh, that's going to be fun.
No. Oh my God. If you resurrect that, we will have words, Alex.
They'll be nice words.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. In all seriousness, in terms of the performance background, was that something that had been a thread as well? Or was that kind of the start of being in more of a performer content creator role?
Oh my gosh. Well, that was the beginning for sure. And honestly, I view my first 18 months of content as unwatchable. I said 18 months, Alex, over a year and a half of making content. I view everything for my first 18 months as unwatchable. And I have no performing background. I'm usually comfortable in public speaking, but I'm very, very uncomfortable in front of a camera. And I continue really to be pretty uncomfortable in front of a camera. I think I've just gotten more used to it. So yeah, any you don't have to look that hard. Go back to any of my first 18-month pieces and you'll see they're really stiff, really awkward, really no expression. It's bad. But maybe that's proof that, hey, if you want to create content, go for it and keep at it, and eventually you'll get better.
So what part of it in the early days of it was, because you mentioned maybe feeling a little uncomfortable because your first time in that kind of a performance role in that way in front of a camera. How much of it at that time was doing it because it was fun, and how much of it was doing it to better increase representation within the community? I
would say 80% of it was to increase representation in the community,
okay,
and 20% of it was fun.
Wow. Okay. So you were muscling through some stuff there for sure.
It's just not my natural state, and I was actually really excited to increase the exposure of board game apps because they weren't really getting a lot of coverage back then, and so I was happy to do that, and it is a form of gaming that I truly enjoy. But yeah, from a enjoyment of content creation, I mean, granted, my content wasn't great. Or my presentation, certainly in when I was in front of the camera, wasn't great. I mean, I got a lot of negative feedback back then, a lot of criticism. Some of it was fair, admittedly so, and some of it maybe strayed beyond the constructive zone.
Yeah. Well, it's the internet.
Yeah, it is the internet. So to this day, I think being visible is something that I think it's a value add to the community ultimately. And it continues to be a primary motivator for me to create content today.
Speaking on apps specifically, what was it about board game apps that had hooked you? Was it just that it, again, kind of felt like an almost underrepresented piece of it? It felt like a niche you could own, or was it something you at the time had a real passion for?
It was something I had a real passion for. When I was starting to create content, I do have 2 young children, and children definitely change your lifestyle and how much you can go out and things like that and do game nights. And I found I just was not getting game nights or game plays with other human beings at the rate that I would like them. And then all of a sudden technology enters the picture, and now people are making board game apps, and I'm like, whoa, I can play these games in the comfort of my own home while my kids are napping. This is amazing. So I do have a real passion for board game apps, in part because they helped fill that gaming void that I had. And then part of it too is I did feel like it was a value add in that there wasn't a lot of content. And, I didn't want to go out there and just I wanted to do something a little bit different, something that would be instantly seen as, not run of the mill, to be giving back something to the community, I guess.
Brings me to our first guild question, which is from Charles Fox. And Charles asks, since you are all about the apps, Suzanne, if you could keep only one, would you keep your physical board game collection or your app collection of games?
Wow. I've never thought about that. Well, yeah, I would have to say I'd keep my physical collection. There's really no question. I mean, ultimately, board game apps, I do enjoy them, and I think they're a wonderful, wonderful part of gaming. But board games are about interaction, and there is something magical about the physicality of a game and the components of a game and sitting around the table with friends and family. And I wouldn't ever want to give that up. So yeah, I would have to hit reset on my iPad and keep my physical games.
Maybe 4 or 5 different iPads, just based on probably the sheer number of apps.
I buy the biggest hard drive ones. Let's put it that way.
How big is the physical collection at this point, by the way?
I stopped counting after 650.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, I've got a problem.
Well, as you mentioned early on in my board game marketing career, it's folks like you who make sure I have a paycheck, so thank you.
You're welcome. You're quite welcome.
Josh Niekirk was curious about that specifically, of that collection, of that massive, uncountable collection, about what percentage belongs in the shelf of shame category, i.e. games that you have bought but have not played yet.
So I'm going to call Josh out a little bit here, because Josh is local to me.
Okay.
And while I believe he's a big fan of the Dukes of Dice, I think he's razzing me a little bit because he knows I have a significant number of games that sit unplayed. And thankfully, Josh and his lovely wife are helping me burn through some of those, which I greatly appreciate. But, because I continue to acquire games and things like that, I at any given time, I probably have around 80 unplayed games on my shelf, which I'm not proud of.
Is there a specific shelf where you have these unplayed things, or are they sort of mixed in with everything else?
No, I kind of mix them in, I think in part to, disperse the shame and not have it like facing me like a wall of shame, but also just, that's a lot of games. I don't think that would take a lot of shelf space if I had just shelves dedicated to it, I guess.
That's fair. That's fair enough. So, all right, we continue on with the Suzanne Sheldon story. You join up with the Dice Tower.
Oh, boy.
You continue to work on your craft. You continue doing the app segments. You presumably feel more and more comfortable. At what point did the switch flip from, hey, I'm on the Board Game Breakfast and this is a segment, to I'm kind of a niche celebrity now? Because having attended enough conventions with you, Suzanne, you definitely fit the bill of niche celebrity.
Yeah, I have pretty strong opinions about that.
Okay.
I think within a very small subset of a very small niche community, I'm known. And I think that part of that is that I do video. So like for you, I think it's one of those things, like when we're at a convention, people might see your shirt and be, oh, I listen to the Dukes of Dice. And then they hear you speak and they're like, oh, you're Alex. Whereas because I was doing video content, my face was in public. And so, you've got that more instant recognizability. Is that instant recognition?
But here's the thing is, you also have fans from Twitter. I've been at these conventions. You're not going to pull one over on me here, Suze. The ratio of people who see the shirt and say, oh, hey, I listened to that, versus the number of people who just stop and want to talk or take a picture or some amount, they are hugely disparate numbers. And maybe you're right that some of that's video. People recognize you on its face. But don't sell short the fact that I think there are a good number of legitimate fans and folks who are genuinely really excited to see you in those situations. So I'm sensing a lot of humility, which I tend to as part of this on your behalf. But does the celebrity piece of it make you uncomfortable? Is it something that you try and shy away from?
No, it doesn't make me uncomfortable. I think that label is I'm really tentative about it, because what I find is sometimes people put, and I think just in general, like we idolize people, or we frame people up in our minds in a certain way based on what we appreciate or respect about them. Like if I watch a movie and I really like an actor, and but then I try to always remind myself when I look at people I admire that they're human and that I really don't know much about them, and that they could be, we could agree on a lot of things, we could disagree on a lot of things, etc. And that if people appreciate the content I'm creating or the words I'm putting out there, and they want to say hi and get to know me a little bit, that is amazing. And it's humbling and it's rewarding and it's heartwarming, and it's an amazing ego boost. Absolutely. Like it's so awesome and a little weird, but in a good way, that, people recognize you that you don't know. And they're like, oh, hey, I see what you do and I appreciate it. I'm like, oh gosh, that's amazing. But I think for me personally, going back to that celebrity example, I'm always like, I kind of have this itch at the back of my neck, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to disappoint this person. Like, somebody, they're like, I like what you do. And then I meet them and they're like, oh my gosh, you're a horrible person. I hate you in person. And then I've disappointed them. I kind of have that like nervousness. Like, I'm sorry that I've disappointed you.
Oh man.
And so I think that's just, maybe a personal hang up or whatever, but I definitely have that kind of thing. But no, I am very lucky that the community I've chosen to be part of in board gaming in general tends to be incredibly welcoming and open and kind and respectful. And when I meet people in person at shows and things like that, conventions, that's what they're like. And because of what we all centralize around board games, it's amazing to sit down with somebody who introduces themselves and, play Six Nimmt or Downforce or whatever, and just have fun with a brand new friend. And that's pretty darn magical.
So to that point, BJ from Board Game Gumbo was curious, when you're at a gaming convention, are you more inclined to seek out games you haven't played before, or get to the table a beloved game that doesn't get played at home? And before I kind of let you get to the full amount of that, the full question there, wow, that was a weird phrasing on my part, Steve O'Rourke, the name father, was curious also, does that apply to new gamers? In other words, do you try and play games with folks that you don't know, try and play with as many new people, or is there sort of a comfort zone that you try and settle into? So it's sort of two questions, but both on how you interact at cons.
Ooh, is that the real Steve O'Rourke, your nemesis?
It's Steve O'Rourke, my arch nemesis and bitter rival. Yes,
oh wow,
I still read his questions when they're good.
That's journalism at its purest, right there. I have mad respect for you, Alex. So I'm always all about new games. I'm all about trying games that I don't own and want to test out to see if it's something I want to own, or, a lot of these shows have the new latest, greatest games laid out that I haven't gotten to try yet. And that's always exciting. I definitely have the cult of the new in my blood and love all the new shinies. So when I go to a convention, it's definitely almost always all about that. Although I do find I enjoy teaching, personal favorites to new players as well, and introducing players to some of my personal favorites. Sometimes I really enjoy doing that at conventions as well. As to the people thing, when I first went to conventions, it was definitely more relaxed for me and playing with whomever. The challenge I face now when I go to conventions is that I've got a community and I've got friends now. And I only see these friends because they're from like you, Alex.
Mm-hmm.
I only see you at these conventions, and that time is really precious to me, right? Because we're friends, and I want to spend that time with you. So I do struggle to balance playing with new people versus playing with my current friends. I know some people feel like that's cliquish or they feel excluded. What I don't do is if somebody introduces themselves to me as hey, do you want to play? I almost always say yes. It's one of those things where I'm not necessarily. What I don't do is I don't go to tables that have players wanted signs and sit down and play a game. I basically never do that. But if somebody sees me and comes over and talks me up and, is like, hey, you want to play a quick game? I'm almost always yes to that. And sometimes I'll go around, and if there's a teacher's wanted sign up for a game that I know, I really love jumping in and trying to teach people games randomly that need help around the show. So that's kind of where it is. But yeah, admittedly, the longer I go to these conventions, the more I tend to try to spend time with my friends who I get to see there.
And that's going to become even trickier now that you're in an even more high profile role, I'd have to think.
It's hard to say. I think it depends on the convention too. I think at Gen Con, nobody's going to care who I am. Everything is wild and wackadoo, and there's so many different events and so many different genres of, or types of fandom and things like that are represented there. I think at Dice Tower Con, because, it is a Dice Tower audience, and I think more people probably have some semblance of, the fact that I'm a content creator. Tom's there and promotes all of his content creators there really well as well. So, which kind of increases your visibility. So we'll see. I'm good with where it is right now. And, what I never want to be I never want to come across as exclusionary to people who are there. I've been told I'm intimidating. I was told that recently.
The enforcer.
And I was like, oh, I can totally see that. And I should work on that because I don't want to be intimidating to people who just want to say hi and play a game. I want to be perceived as open and welcoming because that's how I feel.
And that's your MO.
Is it?
I think so.
Well,
That's how I see you, as someone who is in favor of just about anything that makes for a more open and inclusive gaming space. Anyway.
We try.
Yeah, that's a little sidebar there. Anyway, on the Dice Tower podcast side of things, how does that come about?
How did it come about that Mandy and I started doing it?
Yeah, what's the story? Because I got a little beef here. You know what my beef is? Sean found out about this before I did. I was pretty bummed about that. Come on.
Uh-oh. I have no response to this.
It's all good.
I feel like I'm in trouble.
No, you're not. You're not in trouble. But how did that all come together?
It came together very, very quickly. And I think that, basically at Dice Tower Con, Tom and Eric asked Mandy and I to join them for a meeting and for lunch and pitched us the idea. And Mandy and I were, look at each other and we're like, well, of course. I think we were both floored and shocked and ecstatic. And we were like, well, yeah. And then, we go back to the hotel or later and then we're like talking. We're like, oh my gosh, what did we just agree to do? Are we out of our minds? Because it's a big, it's an intimidating thing. But so, it was really that simple. It was just, Tom and Eric and Mandy and I at a buffet at like a Golden Corral buffet in Florida, talking about the podcast. But I think, to answer what I think you're asking in part, I think that Tom is very cognizant that media changes, that communities change, that audiences evolve, and he always wants the Dice Tower to be relevant and interesting and open and contributing. And as a creator himself, I think he likes to change up what he does and try new things and spend his time in different ways. And so I think, probably when he was looking at the content that the Dice Tower was producing, realizing that he had gotten to know Mandy and myself a little bit over time, and understanding too, I think a main motivator that has been discussed before, but maybe not highlighted, is that, just like I was talking about you can go to a show, and if you don't speak, you could probably fly mostly under the radar.
I think even if I do speak, I still fly under the radar. Let's be very clear about this.
Okay. But with Eric Summerer, who's been on the Dice Tower for years and years and is so amazing and has contributed so much to the community because he focuses on audio, they would go to shows and things like that, and people would recognize Tom and Sam and Z right away. And then, this brunette guy that looks quite pleasant next to them wearing a Dice Tower shirt, but who is that? And so I think Tom wanted to increase Eric's visibility in content as well. And so that's where, although the hurricane of late has thrown this off, the intent is, by Mandy and I taking over half of the podcast episodes, that frees Tom and Eric up to produce a video show together in those alternating weeks, which hopefully gets Eric's face in front of more people, because Eric deserves that attention. He's a wonderful board gamer, but more importantly, he is a wonderful person. And I think more people should get to know him and get to know his face. So I'm really glad that they're doing that.
Yeah, Eric's a great guy.
Super great.
Have loved meeting him at Dice Tower cons of late. Michael Farenbrook had a question on this that I'd really like to get your take on, and I think folks have kind of heard about this when it came about. Some did, some didn't. Some are shielded from this. But you mentioned, with YouTube, when you first started, there was some negativity. Some of it was internet trolling. Some of it was legitimate criticism. When you take over as Dice Tower co-host, anytime there's going to be a change on any of these things, there's going to be negativity and there's going to be backlash. There's also going to be a ton of support. He's curious, what was that reception like for you? For me personally, and quite frankly, I'll venture out and speak just a little bit for Mandy, because she and I talk a lot and talk a lot about it. It was overwhelmingly positive. Especially after our first episode aired. The response to the change was, I think a lot of fans were very nervous, and even people who are open to it expressed a little trepidation, and completely understandable. And we expected that, and we understand that. After the first episode aired, we definitely got very fair, constructive criticism that we appreciate, right? Because we want to get better and are open to that feedback. There was some, there are definitely people who don't like it and who are still not fond of, maybe even straying into being upset about the change. I wish it wasn't that way, of course, but I also understand it. We are not Tom and Eric. We are not trying to be Tom and Eric, and we're not going to pretend that we can, quote unquote, replace them. We're not trying to replace them. And then, there were very, very small minority of people who just really, really don't like it and have pretty strong opinions about Mandy and me as people, as what we choose to speak about in the community, and they don't like us. And there's probably nothing we can say or do, no content that we could produce that would ever change their minds. And we try very hard not to focus on that. It's not fun to read or see, but it happens. And you kind of look at it and try to move on and focus on the amazing community support that we have been receiving. Well, and speaking to that small minority of folks, one, yes, it is a small minority. Two, it's a fight I think folks realize but don't fully realize. It's a fight that you have been fighting ever since you got into content creation, and arguably ever since you got into Magic the Gathering back in '94. I mean, this is a fight you have been in for a very long time. This fight for more equality in gaming, better representation on a number of fronts. Does that wear on you after a certain point, or does that kind of criticism encourage you to fight even harder? What does that do over time?
It does wear a little bit, but it really is. I'm it's interesting you phrased that that way, because it really is ultimately primarily a motivator. Because while we get some nasty comments, we also get a lot of people that are not just supportive, but tell us stories of inspiration and ways that we have helped, and that's incredibly motivating and incredibly rewarding. And it's a good reminder of why I'm out there talking about inclusion and diversity. But I'm a human being. I'm a human being, Alex. I have feelings. And it doesn't feel good to have, rude names thrown your way, to have threats thrown your way. It does sting. And again, I don't, sometimes people are like, oh, well, it's just trolling, keep scrolling. And I also sometimes take issue with that too, because it's not quite that simple for a variety of reasons. Because that just keeps scrolling. It is on the internet, but the fact is that reflects behaviors and attitudes that we see in person at shows, in conventions. And I think ignoring it online, if you think ignoring it online, just makes it go away, that's just not true. So I don't subscribe to that either. So it can be draining, it can be tiring, it can be hurtful and upsetting. But for somebody like me, you just kind of push through that moment and try to move on. You vent to friends and and get it off your chest and eat a slice of pie and ice cream and get back into the ring, so to speak.
Do you feel like you've seen the fruits of your labors on that front? I mean, in the now 23 years you've been in the hobby, have you seen improvements?
Absolutely. I have seen a lot of improvements. And, that's not the fruit of my labor, but I think that, the growing just general awareness and consciousness within the community, the willingness of producers and publishers, designers and artists to recognize that they can contribute something very, very positive to make the industry and hobby more inclusive and representative. That is absolutely moving the needle, and it's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. Does that mean the effort is over? I wouldn't say so. I mean, I don't think that this is a mission accomplished banner kind of moment yet, but it is great to see an evolution of the industry. It is wonderful to see tons of women at conventions, and it is great to see more and more content creators as diversify, and I love all of that, and it's exactly where I want us to continue to move towards.
Progress, not perfection.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of putting it.
Jeff Rademacher was curious on sort of a what you can do at home kind of question. He was asking, in your mind, what are the top few things, he says, asks for 3, but top few things that you think gamers can do to help a hobbyist culture, to help the culture become more inclusive?
I love the idea of what can you do at home, because I think that really is where it starts. And I think the first thing I would say is be aware. I find that even the people with the best intentions and so much openness and love in their hearts, especially, I'm just going to put it out there, especially men who've maybe been in the industry or the hobby for a while, they just sometimes don't see things happening. I was at a convention once and I saw a woman who was working at a booth, who was a volunteer in a booth, and something just felt off to me. And I went up to the booth and I asked the woman who was in a conversation with a man, I said, hey, I need your help with this game. Could you help me? And she goes, and then she looks at the guy and she says, excuse me, I'm so sorry, I need to help her. And then we walked into a different corner of the booth and she goes, oh my God, thank you so much. Nothing awful was happening, but she was in a situation that she was uncomfortable, but because she was working, she had to maintain professionalism and you don't necessarily have an easy out that way. But by just being observant and aware, I think I may have helped her a little bit in that moment. And when I talk about things like harassment or problematic behavior or language at the gaming table, 99% of it is completely unintentionally hurtful. Very few people are out there to hurt feelings or be cruel or be mean or be exclusionary, and I don't want to, shock anybody, but, don't use rape as a term when you're playing a game. Oh, I'm going to rape that area. I've been in games where where players are saying things like that. And hey, you know what? If somebody's like, oh, that's so gay, we can be better than that. That's retarded. I don't think people are saying those words or using that terminology because they're trying to be offensive or they're trying to be hurtful. I think it's just worked into their language over the years of, culture and their community. And that's just the way it is. But hey, if you hear that, you don't have to make a big deal out of it, but be willing to say, dude, come on. Or maybe later, just be like, hey, you know what? You said retarded when you were saying, maybe we could not use that word. You know, why don't we try that was ridiculous instead? So, you know, being open and observant, being aware, within your comfort zone and your safety zone, being willing to address things. You don't have to make a big deal out of it. But if you're in a position where you can say something, where you have some influence, where you will be respected, doing that is super duper helpful. And, you know, if you are in a group or in a situation with people who are stereotypically marginalized, or, you know, you can always ask them, hey, what can I do to help you? You know, is there anything I can do to make you feel more comfortable? Or, hey, if you ever have any problems, you can come to me and I will listen and I will do what I can. That's how I think it starts at home, is just within your own playgroup, being open, being supportive, wanting to help each other on a very personal one-to-one basis. And I do see that happening all the time. And I think that's how we get better on that front.
And I think a big part of what you're saying is just keep your eyes open and be a little more aware. And I think it's so easy within the hobby, because it is fun and games, to dismiss it as just fun and games. And I think in some ways we have to hold ourselves to a higher standard as a hobby, right? That this does mean something. It means something to a lot of people. It's a passion for so many people. So yeah, I think what you're saying is absolutely something I hope folks heed. All right, I want to jump back to the podcast for a quick second. Now that you've gotten a couple episodes under the belt, what surprised you most about the process? What have you enjoyed most? What has that experience been like now doing it?
It's so stressful. And I mean, we've, as of this discussion, we've put 3 episodes in the can total. So that's not much. And I will tell you, a lot of the constructive criticism we got in the first episode, Mandy and I are like, yep. Because, you know, even though I've been producing content for almost 4 years now, I'm incredibly nervous, especially for that first episode of the podcast. I was so nervous. And I think that absolutely comes through in the episode in a perhaps negative way. You know, Mandy and I, we Skype together, which I don't think Eric and Tom always do. I think they've done it for so long. They're so comfortable with each other. They have the rhythm so locked down. They don't even need to see each other's faces. But Mandy and I, we jump on a Skype, we kind of warm up, and then, you know, we script. Well, we don't script. We do like show notes, like you do show notes. You know, we kind of organize the conversation. We know ahead of time what games we want to talk about and things like that.
You're giving away our secrets. What are you doing?
I know. I'm pulling open the curtain. So we plan ahead what games we want to talk about and things like that. It may or may not show in the quality of the episodes, but a lot of thought, hours and hours and hours of thought and effort into how we open, how we bump to different segments, what those bumpers need to sound like, how long they need to be, what we're covering, what we're not covering, how we cover it. You know, for example, Mandy and I made a really conscious decision up front that we wanted to acknowledge the game designer, the game publisher, and the game artist when we talked about a game. So we make an effort for every one of those, you know, for all of our games to bring up all 3 of those. We also knew, like, hey, this is an opportunity to mix it up. You know, a lot of people are clamoring for us to have just our version of the segments that Tom and Eric typically produce, which we're not against per se, but we also thought that it was an opportunity for us to bring something new to the Dice Tower listening audience. So we thought, hey, you know, with Tom switching up the format and things like that, why don't we have a segment about older games? And so we came up with Shelf Staple, which is just an opportunity for us to talk about games that are maybe more than 3 years old that we still love and still deserve attention, because more and more people are entering the hobby every day. And so what's old hat to me, or to a lot of these, you know, us hardcore hobbyists, to somebody entering the hobby, they're like, you know, I've never heard of this thing before. This is amazing. And we've gotten really positive feedback on that. And that's where it gets really fun, when we're adding value, when we're adding content that people kind of wanted, and either didn't realize that they wanted it, or were like relieved that they're getting that type of content. That's super rewarding and fun to get positive feedback on that.
How do you find the time to do all of this? Like your life?
I do everything that I do at like a very mediocre level. I think like I'm a C+ student, maybe a B, like a C+ to B student on most of the things in my life.
Man.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that was harsh, kind of, but maybe incredibly honest.
Well, something's got to give. Well, like, for example, my video content, I have not changed the way I produce my video content since I started 3.5 years ago. I would like to. I would like to improve and get better. But to this day, every one of my video segments is still recorded using the built-in camera on my laptop.
I love this answer. I just love this answer in general. Oh, yeah, it's easy. You just mail in everything, and then you're fine.
Ta-da!
All right, we're gonna broaden things out here a little bit as we head into the home stretch, because I've already taken up what little of your mediocre time you have available.
I'm only giving you my best time, Alex. So all my good time I saved up this week for you.
Aw, that's awesome.
And for the amazing Dukes of Dice listeners.
Yay, Dukes of Dice listeners! Thanks for listening and continuing to listen and listening to stuff. And continuing to listen even though we don't prepare as much as apparently Suzanne and Mandy do. Anyway, so let's broaden this out a little bit. And can't get much broader than this one from Josh Niekirk, who asks, what do you consider your greatest gaming achievement?
Oh my good gravy.
Yeah, that's the question.
Do I have gaming achievements?
Oh, come on.
I'm really bad at games. So like I go to like when I track my gameplays, you know? And, like, my win percentage in my game tracker is 27%.
Well, okay, but if you're playing in all 4-player games, that's actually okay.
Yeah, somebody has pointed that out before, and then I showed them, like, I play a lot of, like, it's like, oh, yeah, you're really bad at games. And that's okay, because I still love it. If I had to win games to like them, I would have been out of the hobby years ago.
Okay, wait, I'm going to transition immediately into another question. And this is from SD Donkey. BGG user SD Donkey, who asks, what board game do you feel you are the best at? In other words, if it came to a duel of games for your life, what game would you choose because you know you could survive?
Oh my gosh. Holy cow. I think I'm going to die.
Oh, there's got to be a game.
This is really bad.
There isn't one game that you always win?
Yeah. No, I tend to be very, very good at trick-taking games because I have this deep background in playing them from my childhood. So if I had to play a game, but see, this is where it gets tricky. I would pick Pinochle because I'm really, really good at Pinochle, but that depends on my partner. So as long as I have a really strong Pinochle partner that I gel with, I would pick Pinochle because I got a pretty good shot at that.
Are you good enough at Fox in the Forest to pull that one out since it's a duel
maybe Star
for your
Realms?
life?
Yeah, I love Fox in the Forest. No, because Sean beat me at Fox in the Forest, so I can't pick that one because I'd be dead. So, Star Realms, I play a lot of Star Realms on the app, and I'm pretty good at that one. I'm okay at it. So, at least I have a 50-50 chance there.
Fair enough. SD Donkey also asked, your dream game is being made by this combination of designer, artist, theme, mechanisms. Go.
Mechanism is some kind of card-based worker placement.
Interesting.
Theme is baking or bakery based.
All right.
And artists, that's impossible. Artists would be this amazing, weird amalgamation and combination of Kwanchai Moria, Nolan Nasser, Beth Sobel, Ian O'Toole, and Clemens Franz.
Okay.
And it's gonna work. It's gonna work, Alex. This is really coming together in my head now. And designer would probably be Uwe Rosenberg.
Okay. So this is like a pie-based caverna, but in card form? I don't know.
Let's say pie-based Fields of Arla for 1 to 8 players.
Okay. Or it's Feast for Odin, but it's just a giant bakery. It's literally you're baking him a feast.
I'm in on that 100%.
Okay. The art sounds like a mess in that game, like a complete and
utter. It's gonna be amazing.
No.
Oh, ye of little faith.
Ben Coberly, and by the way, I'm surprised the mechanism wasn't roll and write because we got a couple of questions about roll and writes. Ben Coberly curious if you could keep only one of your roll and write games, which one would it be? And I think I know the answer to this, but I may be wrong.
Oh, Ben, you're a bad person for asking this question. This is impossible.
I think I know the answer to this. We'll see.
No, you don't.
Okay.
You don't
All right.
know.
Well, what's the answer?
Oh my gosh.
We got some good questions, by the way, for this whole thing. Like, anytime you get an interviewee stumped this many times, it's a good thing. So, good job, Gil.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, good job.
Yeah, because the dead airs, I just hem and haw over trying to figure out what I would keep is solid
Sean's
radio.
going to do all this editing. It's fine.
Oh, gosh. Ultimately comes down to one of the things I love about Roll and Writes is just its simplicity, its purity of form, and its streamlined components and mechanisms. So I would go with Quinto.
Yep. Nailed it.
You guessed that? All right, there you go.
Now, in fairness, I could have just said nailed it no matter what you said because I didn't actually say what it was beforehand.
That's right. You have any skin in the game. Darn it.
Well, and so the one that came to mind was Quicks, but I knew it wasn't Quicks, and I knew it sounded like Quicks. So anyway.
Oh, you didn't.
I did know. I knew the game. I just wouldn't have been able to name it if you'd asked me. I would have been like, Quibbles?
I would play a game called Quibblesburg.
Quibblesburg. All right, we're making...
That sounds amazing,
Quibblesburg.
actually.
Does it? Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe
it does.
We'll get all 6 or 7 of those artists you listed off to do the art for Quibblesburg.
I'll get right on it.
Ay. All right. More final questions as we sort of head towards the home stretch. I said it the second time. Still in the home stretch. How many tweets do you average in a day? That's from Benjamin DeBrick.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. Yeah, it's funny. Sometimes people ask me, well, where can we find you? They use exactly that tone of voice too. Where can we find you?
I'm going to be asking that at the end of this podcast, by the way. So be ready for it.
They see. I don't know. It is a lot. Let's see if I have. Well, let's go look. Okay, so I have. Oh my good gravy! I have 58,000 tweets.
In how long of a period of time?
In like 4 or 5 years. So that's not too bad, right?
Well, I think if you average it out on a per day basis, that's still going to look pretty bad.
Okay, so
I'm going to do some math here while you're thinking about it.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know. It comes and goes, and anybody who follows me on Twitter, 1, my apologies, but 2, sometimes I do that horrible practice of threading where like you just write an essay in Twitter, which it's not meant for, and that's why you're supposed to have a 140 character limit, but we break that rule. But it's a lot. So I do a lot.
How many tweets?
At
again?
least a few a day.
I'm calculating this.
58, almost 59,000.
Okay, we're gonna call it 58,000, and I'm gonna give you credit for 5 years on Twitter, 5 whole years, every single day of those 5 years.
Okay.
And is it still gonna be ugly though? Because that's only 1,800 days.
No.
Oh dear. So that's an average of 32 tweets a day.
Oh good gosh. Okay.
Yep. And by the way, that's probably a low number.
Yeah, I do put it in my bio on Twitter that I tweet a lot.
Oh, okay.
I literally.
Well, then everything's good now.
I literally warn people.
Why do you tweet so much?
I found a community there. It's a dynamic platform, and I see lots of entertaining content there. Honestly, Alex, I met you and Sean through Twitter. That's how I first found Dukes of Dice. That's how I have a lot of real life friends that I met on Twitter now, board gaming Twitter. The board gaming community on Twitter is vibrant and active and inclusive and fun and funny, and they have far too many puns, but that's okay. I'll forgive them. And for some reason it just clicks. Maybe I'm a scatterbrained individual and running all around, and the format of Twitter just kind of gels for me. But yeah, there you go. Oh gosh, I really got to change my social media habits.
It's pretty high. That's impressively high, actually.
Yikes.
Yeah. There's not an equivalent of acquisition disorder for Twitter disorder, but I'll try and come up with something.
Oh, I look forward to it.
Trent Turner trying to fulfill the occasionally role-playing games part of the podcast. Have you ever played a role-playing game? If so, what was it and what did you think of it? I have to imagine you've played some kind of role-playing game at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. And, back in the 90s, I actually wanted to play more. I mean, that was when White Wolf was really, really big. So, I mean, and I think this is like a lot of RPGers, I own a ton of RPG books, but I don't get to play much. So, like, I had all the vampire books. I have the Amber books. I really wanted to try Changeling, and I have, like, the entire first print run of Changeling books, and I've never played the darn game. But I've played D&D, I've played Pathfinder, I've done like one-shots, I've done GM-less games. The Protocol series by Jim Pinto is a GM-less game series, that are kind of one-shots. So I have RPG'd. I really, really enjoy it. I love D&D 5th edition. The whole framework just really clicked for me, and I love RPGing. I actually talked to Sean before, Alex, about trying to get like a Skype RPG session going with us.
Oh yeah.
But with all of his free time, he declined.
Hey, guess who actually does have legitimate free time? This guy.
Hey.
Yeah. You got me hooked on the Adventure Zone, by the way. If folks are looking for another podcast to listen to, The Adventure Zone. You should go and listen to it. That was a superb recommendation from you.
Yeah, it's hilarious. It's so entertaining. The McElroy brothers, just in general, also like their flagship podcast, My Brother and Me, is hilarious. Those guys are awesome on so many levels. I love it. I'm glad you like Adventure Zone. Yeah, that's a good one.
Travis was at Gen Con, apparently.
Yeah, I saw that. Would have been cool to meet him.
I know. I'm right there with you. All right, we're now to the food section of the home stretch of the podcast. Now the third mention of home stretch.
Best part. Yeah.
Yay. First one from SD Donkey. Smooth or chunky peanut butter?
Chunky.
All right, that was quick. BJ from Board Game Gumbo. Best flavor of pie to match with pecan praline ice cream.
Pecan praline ice cream?
Yep, he needs a pie flavor to match.
I mean, pecan pie is that too much? Do you think that's too much?
You're talking pecan with pecan? Yeah, I don't know about that.
I'm almost in peach pie territory.
Okay, I was going to go pumpkin. Was going to be my answer if I were faced with the same question.
I'm down with that. See, here's the problem. I can get on board with that, Alex, under normal circumstances. The problem is my mother makes the best pumpkin pie in the known universe. And
so the standards are high.
To muddy that with anything other than maybe a dollop of pure whipped cream is an atrocity. So, a store-bought pumpkin pie, I think that's a great recommendation.
On a broader question, why pie?
I have loved pie since I was a kid. My mom will tell this story of like when I was a little girl, I was upset and my mom was like, well, what? Because I'm an only child, so I'm super spoiled. And my mom's like, oh, Suzanne, what's wrong? And I said, I'm just sad, Mama. And she goes, well, what can we do to make you happier? And I said, I want some pie. And I'm literally like 6 years old, guys. So I just always loved it. I mean, what's not to like about pie? It can be sweet, it can be savory, it's got carbohydrates, it's, sugar and fruit and a gabillion different flavors and textures. It's amazing.
Suzanne's appearance on Holding Court brought to you by the National Pie Council. Pie, it's good for you.
It's health food.
Yeah, no, it's not. No, you're a bad influence.
Thank you.
Favorite pie that you've had? I guess maybe excluding the pumpkin pie that your mom made. Best pie that you know of in the known universe.
Best pie that I know of in the universe, huckleberry pie. Because huckleberries aren't very common. They're like a small, super intensely flavored blueberry. And it's so good.
Okay. Is there anyone that makes it right in Seattle?
There are huckleberries in like the mountains, so you can get huckleberry pie out here. And to be honest, one doesn't stand out. I just really like huckleberry pie.
Okay, fair enough. That's from the pie expert, so it's a good recommendation.
But let's face it, strawberry rhubarb pie is amazing. Tart cherry pie, a beautiful apple cranberry pie, key lime pie. I mean, I'm like that guy in Forrest Gump with the shrimp.
Oh yeah, yep.
Yeah, like I can do the pie thing forever. So we should probably move on.
You should have a pied cast.
Oh, God, Alex.
Womp womp.
Don't make me hang up on you.
Nope, don't do it. Wait, there's one more important question. Are you ready for it?
Okay.
If you could be one flavor of ice cream, what flavor would you be and why?
I've
asked this question to literally every Holding Court interviewee ever. Suzanne Sheldon.
I didn't think you were going to.
I asked that
You
everyone.
weren't going to include me. I thought I was special.
The only time I didn't ask it was for the Mike Primo interview recently, and that's because I didn't know at the time I interviewed him that it was a Holding Court. So he got off the hook. You, madame, are not getting off the hook.
I feel like I should get off the hook.
Answer the question.
It would be huckleberry pie ice cream. It would be vanilla ice cream with a huckleberry pie smushed up and mixed in.
Okay, but why? But what does that say about you? That's the whole thing with this question. It's not what would your favorite kind of ice cream be and why. It's what kind of ice cream would you be and why.
It's because I am like 42% pie. This is, like people don't I always wear shoes. Like I never go barefoot. People don't know this about me. I don't go barefoot because I'm actually physically a human pie hybrid and I hide it. And so I would be entering like just vanilla ice creams to not muddy my flavor. And then that would make people happy because it would be delicious. And I want to make people happy. You ask the question, you get the answer, you get
Well,
buddy.
that explains why you're so sweet.
Yeah. Oh God. Okay.
Well, we're back off the rails again. Hey, Suzanne, as promised, where can people reach you?
People can find me on. I really don't want to point them to Twitter now because I'm very self-conscious about this
find her. She'll be on Twitter.
volume of tweeting. I'll be on. But if they want to actually find me, that's where they find me.
I think about like 50% of Suzanne's day is refreshing her notifications.
Hush you. Hush. Don't tell my secrets. I'm at 425 Suzanne on Twitter. You can see me on Board Game Breakfast on the Dice Tower's YouTube channel. You can listen to me on the Dice Tower podcast every other episode with Mandy Hutchinson. And, you can always email me. I'm 425suzanne@gmail.com if you ever have any pressing questions about games or pie or Alex's dirty secrets that I usually don't tell to the world. But since he's teased me a little bit here, I'll share them with you.
I am an open book. I have no secrets.
Okay.
Try me.
Well, they don't know that. I'll make stuff up now, buddy.
And if you want to find out about Restoration Games, which I didn't ask her about at all because I forgot to, you can also do that there too. So there's that.
There you go. There you go.
I failed in my duty to become a better board game marketer. I apologize, Gray Fox Games. I didn't get the company secrets that I was supposed to. Dang it.
Well, yeah, I was just gonna say maybe that was like you're playing it off like it was an accident, but maybe that was intentionally like, oh, competition.
No, definitely not. Nope.
Twirling the mustache.
Just completely got lost in the moment and forgot. Anyway,
that seems much more realistic, actually.
Suzanne, in all seriousness, thank you for being one of my best friends in this hobby. I would not have had the kind of convention experience I had getting into the hobby without you. You were there, kind of guiding the way and making sure I felt comfortable and making sure I felt at home. And beyond that, thanks for helping me get my job. I don't know if folks know that you helped me get my job. And thank you for being a friend of the podcast and a friend in general and an awesome person and an awesome person in the hobby. So keep doing what you're doing because you're awesome. That's about it. That's all I got.
Oh, you're so sweet. And honestly, thank you to the Dukes of Dice listeners. I know that you and I talked about this, Alex, about like, is it weird because I've been on the podcast? Is it self-serving or whatever? And apparently the Dukes of Dice listeners said, no, it'd be cool. And I think that that's really kind of everybody. And I appreciate you listening. And as you know, Alex, I have deep fondness for the Dukes of Dice in my heart. So I am honored to have been on my very own holding court.
Thanks for looking out for the little guy, Suze.
Anytime.
We're going to get crushed under the boot heel of the Dice Tower podcast. Okay. Still off the rails, still rambling. Thanks to Suzanne Sheldon. Thanks to you for listening. Thanks to Patreon folks for backing it and making it happen. We will see you next time on Holding Court. Thanks, Suze.
Thank you.